the record button as students and guests are joining us. Just give a minute for any of the slower clickers. But the quick clickers are here first. And welcome to those that have just joined us. We'll probably get started in, we'll give 2 or 3 minutes from other folks that are coming in from the main room and still looking for our Zoom room to make their way in here. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the What I Did with My Degree panel event. We're so glad that you're here. And my name is Tina Lynn. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the CUNY SPH Student Career Advisor. Tonight, we'll be hearing from public health professionals and CUNY School of Public Health alumni who hold a degree in health communications for social change. Before we begin the panel, I want to give context to this degree program at CUNY School of Public Health. The Master of Science degree in Health Communication for Social Change prepares students to achieve meaningful public health outcomes through communication, social marketing, and behavior change strategies. Students gain core public health competencies and receive training in health literacy, strategic marketing, social media strategy, multimedia production, and health entrepreneurship, along with other critical communication domains. For more information, feel free to visit the CUNY SPH website. Tonight's panel will include moderated questions followed by audience Q&A. And as a reminder, you're able to move between this breakout room and others at any time. The Zoom chat will be open for any comments or questions you may have. Now, let's hear from our panelists. Each panelist will introduce themselves and briefly explain their daily responsibilities in their current role. Let's start with Magdalene.
Kia ora, I'm Magdalene Harris. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from the health communication program, I think last year, with Shanaz and Lauren, as we were the first cohort to go through the program. I am currently a PhD candidate at the Department of Preventive and Social Medicine at the University of Otago here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where I currently am, even though I'm still based in New York most of the time. That department is pretty much public health, but they're using a different name. My research at the moment is focused on Kiwi veterans and their mental well-being as they transition from the New Zealand Defence Force to civilian life. And I'm specifically looking at the roles that tertiary education and identity can play in that transition. So for my current job duties or description of my role, I am right now mostly speaking to stakeholders, putting together an advisory group for my research, talking to them about their research needs, whether they want to be interested in participating in some manner, and then reviewing literature, reviewing policy, and planning my research.
Thank you, Magdalene. Next, let's move to Shanaz.
Sure, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanaz Hussain. Pronouns are she and her. Also, of course, health communications graduate from the year 2021. I am currently the director at Greater New York Hospital Association. I paused because I work on a program at Greater New York Hospital Association called Hindsight, which is the website that you see down by my name there. It is an online resource directory that we operate. Our organization, just to give you an overview, is a membership organization. So all of the hospitals and health systems in the tri-state area turn to us for support regarding patient quality, population health, just a variety of things that may come up in their space that they're not equipped to handle. And so we support all of the member hospitals in those areas. Specifically, I work on our population health initiatives, and the tool that I work on addresses various health and social service needs outside of just the clinical setting. So we're learning more and more about, social determinants of health and different social drivers of health that impact one's health outside of just clinical services. And Hindsight seeks to provide folks with information on food and housing and a variety of others. So thanks for having me.
Great, fantastic. And to round out our panel, we've got Ms. Swan Patras.
Hi, everyone. I'm having issues with my internet. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. Awesome. Hi, my name is Lauren Swan Patras, she, her pronouns. And I was also part of the first cohort of the MS Health Communication for Social Change program. My current role is I'm the managing editor of the Journal of Health Communication, and that is actually housed at CUNY. And some of my responsibilities include managing the almost 1,000 submissions that we get a year, ushering papers through the peer review process. I also am, I help and support our team of senior editors at the journal as well. I manage the journal's online presence, both with our social media accounts and our online, we have a supplemental site as well. So it's really great. I get to actually I get a sneak peek into emerging research in health communication, in the health communication field. So that's currently what I'm doing.
Amazing. Thank you for all of those introductions. Our first question, I'd like to direct that to Magdalene. You graduated from CUNY SPH in 2022, and you're now attending university as a PhD candidate. So what motivated you to continue your education after receiving your MS and being in the workforce? And what do you hope to achieve with this additional experience?
I'll unmute myself. Thanks, Tina. So I might start a little bit earlier with how I decided to pursue the MS in health communication, because that was probably the bigger decision than continuing to pursue education after that. And I worked as a marketing consultant for, I think, 5 years, working on consumer research and digital strategy. And every year that I did that, I was wondering what I was doing and why I was doing it, because it's primarily about helping companies sell more products to consumers. And so I couldn't really work out what I wanted to do instead of that. In my first, attempt to try to do something meaningful with my life, I got into community organizing. So I volunteered as a housing organizer, working on tenants' rights campaigns and housing justice in New York City and state. And I did that for a number of years on my free time. But eventually, when the pandemic happened, I was like, I can't just limit myself to 1 day a week of doing good work and then have the rest of my time be like terrible, detrimental to the world work. And so that got me interested in public health, and I was particularly interested in the program at CUNY because it would allow me to use all the skills and experience that I gained as a like marketing strategy consultant and bring that to a field that I actually cared about, which was public health and health communication. And so when I got there, one of the things that I wanted to do was research. And it isn't a required part of your capstone as a health communication student, but a number of us decided that they wanted to do it anyway, and I was one of them. And so for my capstone project, I did a research project on the barriers and facilitators to accessing mental health care for student veterans. And that was in-depth interviews with, I think, 21 veterans that I talked to. And I was just like in love with the research process. It was super fulfilling and meaningful, and talking to people about their experiences and the generosity of their time and their perspectives and the insight that they had on what they experienced and what would be solutions was, I found it like really moving and meaningful. And that process, I guess, made me realize that I wanted to continue into research. And so a PhD was a way to do that. And what brought me to the University of Otago, which is here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, was that I wanted to bring my skills back to my home country in an area where this sort of research, there's very minimal research on veterans in New Zealand. And there's also, barely any research, like barely any funding, barely any time devoted to it. So I knew that I'd have a bigger impact here than I could in the United States. And so, yeah, that's what it got me here. And what I hope to get out of it is setting myself up for a career where I can continue to research, because often you require a PhD for like particular roles.
Wow, thank you for sharing about just how these industry skills in marketing communications, how you wanted to transfer that into more like mission-oriented work in finding that meaning and filling these gaps in a very much needed space. And I think a lot of our students can kind of identify with that mission orientation. So great to hear that. Shanaz, this next question is for you. In your bio, you mentioned your experience of almost 10 years with special focus on health communication, social determinants of health, health disparities, health equity, and social justice. What sparked your initial interest in public health, and how did you get started in the public health field?
Thank you, Tina. And I know that's a mouthful, so I appreciate you reading that off. Yeah, I have been very fortunate that from the get-go, I've always had an interest in health and wellness and all the things. So I was born in the Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago, and I immigrated to the U.S. With my family at 8. So I have a love culturally for food and cooking, and that's where a lot of my initial interest peaked in terms of health, because I was thinking about pursuing a career in nutrition. So that's initially where my connection there began with health. And then as an undergraduate student at Brooklyn College, I was going through some of the introductory courses for nutrition and found that it was a narrow field for me in terms of I had so many more interests and things that I wanted to do, and found that the track of being working up to be a registered dietitian would be it wouldn't really fulfill all the areas of health that I wanted to focus on. And so at that time, I believe that's when the School of Public Health was formed. All the graduate programs came together and moved up to Harlem. But at the undergraduate level, there wasn't a public health degree being offered. Until I always have a lack of programs being created just when I'm in need of one. And so similarly, public health became an undergraduate offering at Brooklyn College. And I moved into that track instead, and was like, I'm not sure what this public health thing is, but it says it's health related. It's supposed to be a broader scope. And so I think this is where I'm going to find, my footing. And so I started on that track and got involved with some faculty doing research, again, tying in my Caribbean heritage background into some research that a professor was doing on campus related to diabetes in Jamaican and other Afro-Caribbean populations. And so I got involved in some work there, and similarly to Magdalene, loved being a part of focus groups and interviews and talking to communities and, really learning about the importance of community engagement in all of the work that public health requires. So that sort of laid the foundation for that. And I continued on, went on to work at the New York City Health Department after I graduated undergrad. And as many of you know, or will come to know, in public health, many jobs, when you do need eventually a master's to working in the field, especially if you're trying to really have some of the bigger impacts and maybe work at some larger systems like I do at a hospital association. And so, again, I was very lucky to know public health was going to continue to be my track, and I found the MS Health Communications program at CUNY School of Public Health. When the page of, the website that's currently available for the program wasn't even built at the time, and I reached out to Dr. Chris Palmedo and met with him and talked about the program, and he was letting me know it was in its very early stages, but this was an opportunity for us to help curate the core, the whole program with him, and there was so much input from many of us building the program. So I picked the health communications program because of that foundation of working with communities and talking and learning how to communicate really complex health information into plain language, to how to be, very straightforward when speaking to people, answering questions directly, being clear, concise, debunking myths. Those are some of the things that led me in this direction, as opposed to community health, which I know is often a track that one may connect back to this. And then, I have a love for figuring out how to incorporate technology into all of the work that we do. Technology is such a big part of our life. And so in my work, a lot of my work is involved with I like to explain it that, there's not a person with a computer science degree doing my job. They needed someone with a background to do my job, because all the other skills could be taught essentially, but they wanted someone with those core understanding and basic understanding of public health and how to engage with disease in that way. And so that's, where I am now. And I hope one day, just like Magdalene, to also pursue a PhD, but between now and then, since graduation does feel like it sort of just happened, so just taking some time to figure out where my next track would be. But I hope to continue on in this space.
That's wonderful. Yeah, celebrating the moment and the accomplishments so far. And I just loved hearing about that, what sounded like a bit of this non-linear journey, but that what stayed constant throughout was how you followed your interest in staying grounded in those interests around food, culture, heritage, community and communication and technology, and tying that all together. Thank you. And Ms. Swan-Patras, in your bio, you mentioned that you're drawn to the intersection of storytelling and public health. What does that intersection look like? And how did your time at CUNY SPH build upon your public health journey?
Sure. Thanks so much. It's my journey through public health is kind of similar to Shana's in that my background is in theater and storytelling. That's what my undergraduate degree is in. And so I was in New York. I was part of a couple theater companies. I worked with an oral history nonprofit, and I was really interested in stories, how people share their stories. And based on my own personal journey with health and nutrition, Shanaz, I'm so happy to hear that we had something kind of similar in that. I became interested in public health and how messaging was being shared. I'm interested in how we talk about public health, not only what we say, but how we say it. And I think that what we can see with the pandemic in front of us is that there has been a lot of messaging that has been successful and a lot of messaging that hasn't been successful. And I really love storytelling and narrative because I have this theory that that stories are how we try and break down the difference or the distance in between people. And health is something that everyone will experience. And so sharing your story or your narrative, your anecdotes, your childhood memories, your cultural dishes, your, memories from when you were school kid, all of these different stories that we share are ways of introducing ourselves to the world. And so I think that there's a really great tool and opportunity for public health communicators to use this universal thing, which is a story, and both share information and also amplify the voices and experiences of people who aren't traditionally heard, right? So that's sort of how I got into public health, and what I think that is an emerging tool and an emerging important tool that we can use as public health communicators. I think, traditional messaging may not be relevant as much anymore. We're in a time of social media. We're in a time of mis and disinformation, highly politicized environment that is, of course, affecting public health and how people speak about public health. So if storytelling and narrative, if that can be one tool to share a message and reach, hard to reach communities or hesitant communities, that's one more tool in our toolbox that we can utilize. And I believe the second part is how did CUNY help me with that? And I think what was really great about CUNY and this program in particular is that I consider myself a non-traditional student. My background was in theater and in the arts, and I have a double major in English and American literature, so the humanities. And what I was really happy to see was that was embraced and encouraged within this program. Again, because this field is changing and rapidly changing, I think that there is space for people who do not necessarily have a science background to be in this field. And it is that bridge where we need to take this information, this emerging research, and we need to make it accessible, and we need to make it engaging, and we need to make it so that everyone can understand it and access that information. And so I think CUNY really supported me in that. And in fact, my capstone was looking at storytelling and narrative in public health interventions. So it was actually the study of stories and public health. And I think, and I'm very grateful for the fact that was an encouraged aspect and perspective to take while I was a student.
Thank you for sharing that. Like a non-traditional background in such a unique moment in time, and what an opportunity that our students have to move the dial in our world and what's so universal with health and with stories. So thanks for sharing that. And thank you to each of our panelists for already giving us so much important information to start us off with. And there's still more to come. We also want to invite our audience to drop questions in the Zoom chat if anything comes up. But in the meanwhile, we've also had questions submitted to our panelists when people registered. And we've collected those questions, and our panelists will get a chance to answer a few of those here tonight. One of the things that came up were students who were wondering about the return of investment on a master's degree and pursuing it at CUNY. So I'll open the floor to any of the panelists who want to just hop on and share their thoughts on this question.
Sure, I can start. I know I believe I mentioned it in my intro. I'm thinking back, there was something I wanted to connect it to, but in any event, I, having had my undergraduate degree at CUNY and now my graduate degree at CUNY, I'm a huge advocate of CUNY, and CUNY has, I like to say, just given me everything that I have in my life, meaning, you know, everything from the social networks and connections to a high quality education, and has really allowed me, again, an immigrant into the United States, to be able to afford higher education. My undergraduate degree was free essentially because my family qualified, and I didn't have to pay for that. So I had no debt at the undergraduate degree level. And then for my graduate degree, I was able to fortunately live at home, work, save, and pay that as well, and also have no debt for my graduate. And so I'm very, very thankful for that. Definitely a place of privilege to come from, but and I also may mention money and numbers as I talk tonight, because that's just something I'm also very transparent about. So I think it's important to talk about that when talking about, for, you know, many of you who are making these big decisions. It's not just about the career you're going into, but making sure it's also the right decision for you at this time. And so you know, monetarily, it's been a huge return on investment in the sense that I make a living. I also don't carry any student debt, but I also, it's not like it was a trade-off in terms of cost. I have a very, what I would say, high quality education, and maintain many of the connections and relationships that I've made at CUNY, which is invaluable long-term. And I think that is something that it not only comes down to the faculty at CUNY, because of course, like Tina here reached out to us and, you know, made that contact and wanted us to come back here and speak to you all, but you also should feel free and comfortable to also reach out as well. And I think I've always felt like that was something that I could do as a student, and even now as an alumni. And again, these are invaluable things that to me are a huge return on investment.
Yeah, if I can hop on to that as well. My experience, my undergrad experience, I went to NYU, which is very, very expensive. And I don't think I quite understood the responsibility in paying back and what that would require. And so I took many years off between undergrad and a graduate program because it was so cost prohibitive. And so, you know, CUNY, I think, is much more accessible. And I would also say that public health, I think, is rightfully getting a lot more attention. And so I think there will be more opportunities and hopefully increased funding for those opportunities. So I think the return on investment is going to increase as we have seen, and hopefully we can maintain this dialogue that public health research, public health positions are very, very valuable and very, very needed. And so I think that will also increase the value of this degree. And then lastly, because CUNY is a lot more accessible cost-wise, I think it also gives you the space to investigate other career opportunities or even hobbies or interests that you can tie in. That was one thing that I wasn't really able to do with my undergraduate degree because I was so focused on payments, on my student loan payments. And so I feel like that kind of boxed me in, and I didn't have as much time to really explore things. So I think that while you're in your program, you can explore things, but there's also a little bit more space to explore once you're out and pursuing careers.
I have maybe a slightly different answer on return on investment, because I'm still a student, so I'm not working, so I can't really answer the financial aspect of it. But also, this degree wasn't a financial decision for me, which I understand is because I'm in a position of privilege. I'm able to make a decision that's not based on finances, but I did it because I was like deeply unhappy in my old career. So even if it paid well, it wasn't good for me. Going back to school I've been happier than I've been in years as a result of that. So for overall mental health, huge return on investment. And part of it with CUNY as well, like it is affordable. I didn't consider any other universities. New Zealand only has public universities, so I didn't think of a private option, honestly, when I was in New York. Part of that is because I want to study health because I believe in public institutions. And that is a motivating factor for me. And part of it is, this is communication related. If any of you remember the ads in the subway that CUNY used to have that said that CUNY's lifted more people to the middle class and beyond than all of the Ivy Leagues combined. And that is huge. That's way more important to me than anything an Ivy League could offer. Yeah, it's like much more equity focused, much more justice focused than an education that I could have at a prestigious university.
Public health at a public institution, and not only just that cost factor of an accessibility factor of what to consider coming in, but the opportunities that present even beyond through the community here at CUNY SPH, through the centers and institutes, not only just at CUNY SPH, but CUNY across all of the 19 campuses as like a system, a public institutional educational system, and just the in this time and space, and what this degree will mean as we emerge from this unique time. Thank you all for sharing about that. I'd be interested to hear what are a few of the skills you've gained from your MPH or from your MS degree that you're using today at your workplace. Anything from classes or internships? I'd be interested in hearing about the skills aspect.
I can start with that. So my role is a managing editor of the Journal of Health Communication, and so my research brain, my study brain definitely is activated. Critical thinking is activated. I also run our social media, so Twitter posts and LinkedIn posts and creating visuals for that is there. And I think also applying the question of how is this furthering the field? Because I had background in the research, I'm able to look at these incoming manuscripts and say, how is this moving health communication forward, health literacy aspect of it, and then also being aware of that growing field of health communication. What other things can we pull in? What other manuscripts can we share that are helping to support that expanding definition of health communication? So I guess, the more traditional research, yes, and then also what else is growing in the field and how can I and the journal help support that as well?
That's great. It sounds like strategy as well with that critical thinking. Thank you. Magdalene.
Yeah, I'm using pretty much everything still, yeah, because I'm still doing research, so everything's been helpful. One of the things I'd say is my research isn't health communication specific. It's, I guess, more general public health, community health, but health communication could be an outcome of it. But even with that, communication is so vital in all research. I use the skills in every part of what I'm doing, because if you're doing community-based research, your research is based on communication. It's based on community engagement. It's based on stakeholder engagement. So even for things that I was maybe less excited to look into when I started my degree, like the intersectoral and multi-sectoral partnerships, those frameworks that we learned as things that I've been applying in my job now. My job, it's pretty much like a job, my PhD. And so that's been huge. And then obviously skills around interviewing and analysis. I am grateful to have had that foundation through CUNY that I'm going to be able to build upon. And one of, honestly, like it's not really a skill, it's more like a mindset thing that CUNY helped with. That's kind of the way that I view the possibilities of research. Before I went to CUNY, my undergrad, I got a psychology and art history degree. And in my psychology degree, research was pretty like top down, I would say extractive and little accountability to the communities that you're engaging with. So it was pretty like academics would decide what is important, they'd decide the methods, they'd, you know, go into a community, extract information, give nothing back, and then publish a, you know, a journal article where you're like, what's the point of that? What does it actually mean to the people who participated or the communities who participated? And in CUNY, I learned about community-based research and decolonizing approaches to research that kind of shift that. So instead of you deciding what's important and coming in and taking information, you recognize the taonga or gift that is people's participation in that research, and you respect that, and you're accountable to the communities, and you build research with them that is deeply relevant to their needs and aspirations. And that shift of like what is possible through research, that happened through my study at CUNY. And that's something that I approached before in community organizing, but I didn't really see as a potential for research. So that came out of my degree.
Thank you for sharing about how this advocacy element of this work in elevating these stories of these communities, and it kind of like ties into also what Ms. Swan-Patras was sharing with us about strategy and that critical thinking and kind of like furthering this field. That's wonderful. Thank you both for that. Shanaz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Magdalene and Lauren have mentioned. The degree specifically that we're, you know, speaking about tonight and representing is, as the name implies, heavily communications focused. And so that's, of course, skills that across the board, whether it's, you know, actually the content or giving a presentation or presenting our capstone, like the actual act of presenting and all of these things are key. I mean, not just in public health, but any workspace really, and being comfortable to speak with your peers and talk about your work is really important, and being able to effectively communicate that, again, outside of just public health, right? Just talking, it's so important to be able to do that. So I think that's one of the major skills I'll say I've taken away. And to add to what Maggie mentioned about the these, you know, skills and experiences and things you gain that are not necessarily the textbook content that we've gone through, right? So CUNY SPH as a whole just does all of this incredible work with, you know, regarding social justice and equity, and just really trying to shine light on marginalized communities and give them a voice and a seat at the table in really everything they do. And so I've, you know, had the opportunity to take some elective courses with Professor Roberts. You know, I'm thinking community organizing and just all of these other courses that, again, you walk away with not just the content, but you learn about, you know, especially living in a diverse city like New York City, how to be mindful of other people and talk to other people and respect pronouns, and whether, you know, someone is able-bodied or not, and just all of these different things, you know, play into it's all of its public health, and all of it affects one's health, and are things that we, you know, should keep in mind, again, not just in public health, but as humans, you know, day to day. And I don't know of any other institution that really builds all of their programs and work on that sort of foundation about equity and sort of putting students and being mindful, just even about where CUNY SPH is physically located, right? Where it is in Harlem it's physically located. That's something that's always come up about being mindful of the community that the school exists even within, and all of the things that come with that, and the proximity of the school to the Bronx, one of the neediest areas of the country, and in terms of public health and health infrastructure and resources. All of that I think is so important, and I've taken that away again, outside of just the degree, which has been tremendous in my day-to-day work, but CUNY SPH as a whole has added that added layer of awareness for me.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's not just classroom knowledge and these skill sets in research and communications frameworks, but it's the community as a classroom, and the New York City as a classroom. And I'm hearing about kind of all that you're sharing about these mindsets and these attitudes and these values that you've gained from your time as students, and what you're bringing forward into your workplaces. Thank you for sharing that. And speaking of talking it up and speaking up, there's a question in the chat from Melissa around what were the challenges in making connections and networking in a fully online degree program, and any tips on this, like what are some ways that someone entering the field can start networking?
I can start. So I'm actually based in Southern California. So the challenge of not being in New York, and I apologize, the sun is setting, so there's I'm trying to find a shadowless place. But yeah, it's very challenging to not be in a physical room with your colleagues and work in that way. And so I think that there's a sort of restructuring the mind about how, at least for me, how I would learn. I think that the best thing to do is reach out to those classmates whose work you're impressed by, and say, can we have a digital coffee date where you do a Zoom and you say, hey, I really liked that response that you had in the discussion board, let's talk more. I also, while I was a student, I worked on a social media campaign called Big Shots that was through CUNY, and it was a social media based campaign that recognized the work of everyday heroes in communities confronting vaccine hesitancy and COVID-19. And one reason why I volunteered to be part of this campaign was so that I would interact with colleagues more, because we weren't meeting in classrooms, or we weren't meeting in a quad. So, trying to figure out non-traditional ways of making that contact and then nurturing those relationships, I think is really important. And maybe those opportunities aren't right in front of you, but emailing your advisor or emailing a professor whose work you're really interested in and say, hey, what opportunities do you have that I can work with other students? Because I think also we are seeing that work models and education models will be shifting, and I think that these changes, a lot of them will be permanent. So I think we have to get creative about how to nurture those relationships. But I think that those opportunities are out there, and every experience I've had of trying to nurture those relationships have been met with, awesome, let's see what I can do. Great, here's this person, let me introduce you to them. So I think those resources are there for sure.
Yeah, we never know unless we ask and show up and step into that space.
I'll just add, in addition to everything Lauren mentioned, the program directors of this program specifically, at the time, they had arranged several sort of meetups and meet and greets in the city for students who happen to already be in New York City, which I know is not the case because it is an online program and it doesn't require you to be in the city. But there have been several get-togethers arranged. So I believe those will continue both in a digital space and in person. I highly recommend you go to them. I often just pop in as an alumni just to, again, just see people. Sometimes it's helpful to just connect that way. So that's something that's, in addition to the digital space, just keep an eye out for when you are a student. And you also, to that, you sort of have to put yourself out there a little bit if you are looking to make connections and network. And I'll say it may be uncomfortable or awkward at first if you find that that's a challenge for you. But to be straightforward, people love talking about themselves and they love talking about their work. And if you reach out and want to set up some time, I think that's such a huge ego booster. And people want to talk about their work, especially if you're interested in it and you have questions and you want to hear about what they do. It's a great way to again, we may think it's awkward and uncomfortable, or they may, or we think the people that we're reaching out to find it that way. We're like, oh, who's this strange person in my inbox? No, like we're not thinking those things. I love sharing my email, and I hope after this my email and stuff will be circulated. And so let this be one of the first networking opportunities you have to reach out to me even after this. And yeah, I think just put yourself out there a little bit. The worst that can happen is someone doesn't respond, but that's okay, and you just move on. And you find especially your professor is someone that's going to see you frequently, and that's the first person you could start off with, and maybe they can make introductions to other people and make those connections as well if you find that it's difficult to facilitate them yourself. So there's definitely several ways. Also, aside from the professor-led organizing, in-person meetings, feel free if you are able to. I mean, you can also do that. That's, again, really putting yourself maybe out there, but it's really going to come down to that willingness to want to engage with people. I will say I live in Brooklyn, and I've been to the School of Public Health 3 times. A couple of those times were to pick up my cap and gown and drop it back off. So I don't frequent the School of Public Health just because I never had a reason to, right? And many of my peers at the time of the program were not in New York City, but I have gone to other events and met people in other spaces. So just something to keep in mind.
I agree fully with Lauren and Shanaz's recommendations there. And if I could add one, it would be to look forward to group projects, because group projects are the way that you really get to know your classmates. I know they can be a source of dread for students, and I understand that. But the closest connections I made in school were from group projects, which was great. And I'd also say, like, your classmates are the ones who are going to be in this field for the future. So networking with them is highly valuable. Even if they're students, I know a lot of people have come from careers in the field already well before they're studying, and everyone will most likely pursue careers in the field. So they're a great connection to make, in addition to your TAs and your professors and other people you can meet at the as a staff level too.
That's great. Thank you for sharing about these, the kind of taking that initiative and having that courage to take that step into these spaces, whether it be with classmates, professors, the campus community, even on LinkedIn. And I'm also curious about industry professional associations, or maybe APHA or other conferences that you might have all been involved in, what your experiences there were like, or if those are also opportunities for networking.
Yeah, I went to the APHA conference this past November in Boston for 2022. And I was also the week before, I guess it was the week of conferences, I was at a conference, part of a panel in Washington, DC for the Global Communication Summit. And those two were amazing opportunities. And I think that if anything, like Shanaz mentioned, reaching out and being uncomfortable because it is a non-traditional model will give you the skills to reach out to people who may not be a part of CUNY, but who are, potential partners or, networking. I think that it's never a bad idea to reach out to people. And so I actually attended both these conferences with a recent graduate of the same program, Tanja, who we were working on these projects together. And I made a joke where at APHA, I was like, it was like a kid in a candy store going to each booth. And it was so exciting to see what all these different organizations are doing. And so, use those opportunities, go to that conference, go to those networking events. And I will say that everyone I have met who is a current or former CUNY student, when they see that you went to CUNY, everyone goes, "Oh, I went to CUNY, it's so great." And so that's, never underestimate the entrance or the intro into a conversation, that just saying that we went to the same school, because it's such a massive school, but it's, there are all these great aspects to it that people recognize. So, go to the conferences. LinkedIn, I actually have received a few messages from LinkedIn, both from CUNY contacts and also people who are a third contact who've seen my bio. So, those are very good resources.
Great, thank you for sharing about your experiences there and those resources. And yes, LinkedIn is a golden egg for sure. Another question that came in through the registrants were, as graduate students, what were some challenges you faced during that time, and how did you overcome those challenges?
I can start. I'm thinking about the time we went. So during our time in this program, and I believe we were all in the program at the same time, all the other panelists, we were in the middle of a pandemic. So as far as challenges, although we were online and we did not have to make a transition from to online, there are obviously with, I don't know if folks are familiar with the meme of there's like a dog sitting at a desk and like around them is like everything's on fire. It's sort of like that, where you're in this program, you have to keep up with your assignments, you have to keep up with joining, Zoom, sitting on Zoom for hours, or Blackboard collaborate. You sit on there for hours and you're in class, but and then every evening you're hearing, claps and cheers outside for our healthcare heroes. So there's that juxtaposition of trying to keep it all together, right? While there was so much going on in the world. And because we're a school of public health, thank you, Matt. Yes, Magdalene just posted the meme in the chat. That's the exact one I'm talking about. But, there's all this stuff going on. And because we're a school of public health, there's no way that we went through this program without talking about COVID. Like COVID was a part of a lot of our content that we learned and we talked about, and vaccines and all of that were a part of our program. So I would say for me that was a challenge, because there wasn't a space at the time to not talk about COVID. And I'm sure we all feel this, maybe even not being in public health, but for my day job, I was responding to hospitals' needs for PPE. And then I came to class and we were talking about vaccine hesitancy. And then I logged off, and then we were still trying to figure out what's happening tomorrow. And so it was very hard to find calm in the storm. And just like the meme suggests, you sort of have to sit there and say, like, this is okay. This is going to pass. We'll be okay. And again, I'm sure I'm echoing maybe things that other folks have gone through, and maybe even worse. I was very fortunate, did not lose any family members, did not have any real drastic things happening to me aside from just my mental health. But I also don't want to invalidate that many of us, although we weren't impacted in those tragic ways, our mental health was still struggling. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Yeah, two major challenges that I experienced. One was just the self-discipline and time management, because it's a very untraditional, for me, I'd never learned online before. So switching my brain to not have the normal reminders or indicators and how to structure my work. But like I mentioned before, I think that, a lot of these changes are here to stay, both for education and for work. And so I think that is a good tool to have. And then in a larger scope, and again, my entrance into public health is fairly recent. It was hard for me, especially reading materials that were very upsetting about health inequalities and health outcomes, being able to compartmentalize sometimes. There were times when, you're reading about the struggles in a community, health access and, historical mistreatment and racism and all of these massive, huge, very serious issues and challenges that all manifest and show up in community's health. I also found it challenging sometimes to step away and kind of like refocus on the work, because, as much good as we want to do, there's also a lot of very upsetting truths and realities in this world. And so I think finding a balance in that was also a challenge, and one I think that is going to be ongoing.
Yeah, so appreciate what the conversation is around, like kind of taking care of oneself and the mental health and the challenges through this period, and also not only through the pandemic, but also through all of this unrest that has been things that have been going on for so long too. So what were some of the things that inspired you or like helped you through those as to kind of like move forward in a more positive and stronger way?
I think something that is helpful, and I try and remind myself of, is that, it's a huge mountain in front of us that we need to confront, but everyone's work are the steps towards that effort. And so recognizing, I think it's, Magdalene, what you said was really great about, a mission-oriented and a values-oriented profession and environment, and reminding yourself that it is our opportunity, maybe even responsibility, to make these positive changes to address and confront inequalities and inequity. And if that is in any way invigorating to remind oneself of that, I think do it, because this is again, health affects everyone. So this is a very noble field to be in. That's what I would say.
Yeah, for me, and this is more about community organizing rather than in school, that there's so much wrong at like enormous structural levels that it is very overwhelming. As Lauren said, it's very easy to lose yourself in that and get feel disempowered and disencouraged from, feel like no actions that you personally could take can make a difference. And my way of kind of addressing that, while recognizing that in some cases it's true, is to focus on like local level issues and like smaller for my like community organizing efforts. So I was like, I'm gonna do housing justice, and that's it. That's all I've got the capacity for. I can't do everything in the world, but I could potentially make a change in this area in New York. And so I was part of the campaign to expand the tenant laws that succeeded in 2019, and I led part of a coalition to stop Amazon's headquarters coming to Long Island City as an anti-gentrification effort. And so things like that are just like, they're a small domain and they're limited in scope. And if you can focus on a small piece of something rather than everything, I'd say that's a way to not get super overwhelmed in a way that kind of inhibits you from doing anything at all.
Yeah, great advice, and in that, you know, we can start somewhere, anywhere, and maybe even if it's just in proximity, locally, in something we care about, and also the reminder that of this mountain, that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and that we're all links in this chain, and we can pull ourselves up summit well together. Better together for sure. This is a last call for questions, either in the chat or for those that would wish to raise their hands. I want to give this time. This time is for you, and if you would like to step into that, would invite you to do so as we're coming to the end of our program. Oh, Natalie, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here and holding this panel. It's been really interesting to hear about all of your work. I think my question is more specific for Shanaz. I noticed you have the certification in certified health education specialist. And I was just curious, when is that, like, what paths does that open? Does that certification open for people? Like, when do you know that that is something you need to advance your options? If that question makes sense.
It does, yes. Yeah, so I have the CHESS certification. I believe I got it after completing my undergraduate degree. For those of you not familiar, you do have to meet certain coursework requirements and then sit for a exam to then become certified. And you essentially become a community health education specialist. And the coursework requirement includes a variety of things, such as program development, a little bit of grant writing, some, again, basic understanding of some of the theories of change, and just, you know, really core public health stuff that you'll cover in Public Health 101. And so again, I didn't have to do too much prep for that because a lot of my undergraduate degree covered that, and I was very fortunate to be able to move into that and obtain the certification. I would say the value of the certification comes in a couple of ways, as far as the offerings that the credentialing agency offers. So they have a variety of trainings and continuing education that you as an individual might be interested in keeping up to date with, and you will also earn credits towards maintaining that certification. As far as working in the field, I have not seen CHESS required if you have a master's degree, but I've seen CHESS required, let's say you have a undergraduate bachelor's degree or just an associate's and maybe have not continued on. So I find it more valuable in that way to leverage not having had a whole lot of higher education. And with that said, I think it's really what you make it and sell it to be quite honest, as with any degree. Having the degree and certification is one thing, but then your own experience and your ability to utilize all the skills that were covered in that course also comes down to that. So I guest lecture and will be lecturing this fall at City Tech. And I have no experience in a classroom as far as teaching prior to this lecturing opportunity, but was able to leverage my CHESS certification in that way to teach students. So that is the way that I have been able to use it. I do manage a program, so there's some program management aspects there, but these are not things that an employer was necessarily looking for. But again, you can use it to leverage opportunities, as well as salary and things like that. Really, like I mentioned with anything, it's how you package it and present yourself. You are selling yourself at the end of the day when you go into the field and look for jobs. So I would recommend getting it. If at the end of the day, I would recommend getting it, especially if you have an employer that will pay for it. There is a fee for the exam, and there's a fee to continue maintaining the credentialing. So that's something I've continued to maintain. My employer does pay for it, so I found it valuable and worthwhile to maintain the certification as well.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
Natalie, we so appreciate your question, and we still have one, and this will be the last question, the one from Melissa in the chat about to the panelists on how did you find your current job position and what tools did you use in your job search?
I'll go first. So I was actually very, very lucky. Scott Ratson, who is the co-director of the program, is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Health Communication. And so it was with my work with him and also in the Big Shots campaign that he was also a part of, that, in addition to taking his classes, he was my advisor. That's how the job came up, and I applied, and we had interviews and etc. But what I do see in my skills that other job openings have is the critical thinking, is the relationship management, is the strategic communication and communication plan design. These are all tools that are very valuable and increasingly valuable, that I think many employers across the field will be interested in. And so I think that as specific as it can feel, it's actually a very broad set of skills that we can market.
I'd do a quick shout out to the career office. They've been super helpful with things like resumes and cover letters, especially if you're entering an industry that you haven't worked in before and you kind of don't know what's expected, even for internships. I'd recommend talking to the career office.
Yes, schedule an appointment. I'd love to meet with you.
And I just included in the chat with Maggie mentioning internships, I need summer interns. So if anyone would like to work with me, please email me. We also, I believe your courses may require field work, and so we can also give credit for field work. And these are paid internships because internships should be paid. Just a plug there.
What a great opportunity. And as we come to the end of our program, I really want to thank our panelists for being here with us tonight. And to close us out, each panelist will give us some of their final thoughts. Any closing remarks? Who wants to lead us off?
I can. My closing remark would be that if you decide to pursue a degree in health communication or any degree really, just understanding that your degree is going to be what you make of it. And so if you put a lot of effort and thought into it and you try to build relationships and you know what you want to get out of it and you seek opportunities, and where they don't exist, you create opportunities for yourself, then you're going to you're going to have like a really successful time in education. And there is room beyond the scope of anything on paper. I mentioned before that I did research as part of my health communication degree, and that's not required. I wanted to do it, and the professors are super supportive, and so I got that chance because I was willing to ask them about it and find out who could assist me in that process. So yeah, that'd be the first thing. And second thing would be your past experience in your jobs, in your life, your personal history is going to be, you're going to find out how much is super relevant to your public health degree while you're doing it. And I always learned so much from my classmates, especially in the discussion board post where they brought in information from their current jobs, past jobs, from their life histories. And so it's really unique, I think, to be part of a field where your life can go into it. You can see where everything links.
Yeah, I would say exactly, Magdalene, my thoughts exactly on that. Also, don't sleep on the connections and work experience of volunteering. I'm not in New York. There are a few organizations out here in Los Angeles that I'm really interested in. And even if they don't have a volunteer opportunity like available on their website, reaching out to whoever is their hiring manager and saying, I have these skills, I would love to donate 10 hours a month, something very simple. Don't sleep on the connections that those can make, the experience that brings, and also how that broadens your understanding and definition of health communication.
And I would add that, I mean, again, I'm not sure who's already enrolled in a program or still deciding, but if you're unsure of which track to be on, whether you're deciding between the MS or the MPH, or still trying to figure out the track that you'd like to be on, the degree obviously matters, right? The education you're going to get matters, but across the MPH and the MS, there are fundamental courses that we all take. So you will get that basic public health education. And I would argue not even basic, because there's an EPI course in the fundamentals, right? But you're doing data analysis. So even though it's the intro to those courses, you are getting a really good idea of what biostatisticians and folks that work in EPI do. With that said, while focusing on your education is important, I also want to emphasize the importance of work experience. Having an MPH or an MS is not enough to walk into an interview and say, well, I went to graduate school and so you should hire me. And I don't say that to discourage anyone from, being proud. Like, that's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge accomplishment for us to all go through these programs. But like Lauren and Magdalene have been mentioning, your experiences outside of school, whether that's internships, what paid, unpaid, if you volunteered to be a treasurer at your local, I don't know, food pantry, these are all things that you have to think about how to frame it. And these are all parts of your portfolio, not just that you hold a degree. And I say that because we've gone through a really rough time where many students did not have the opportunity to intern because we went through a pandemic, programs closed, money has been tight, so on and so forth. But my real start in my success in public health is due to all of the internships and the work that I've done. And my degree has supported that and elevated that to where I am now. But it's not the reason I have the success in my career that I would say I'm at this point. So I want to emphasize again, jobs will require an MPH, an MS, a master's degree, and to some extent that's very important in terms of making a living wage and salary, which we all need to do. But as much as you can, and I know I'm talking to CUNY students, and you all probably work because it's just in CUNY that we're just tough in that way where we're working and we're going to school and we're probably working multiple jobs and we have families. But I really want to emphasize, honing in on some of these other things that you might be doing outside of school, just to support you in your career going forward.
Thank you. So much great advice on how to make the most of your degree and your time here at CUNY SPH, from being thoughtfully present with your academics, as well as pursuing these experiential opportunities, whether they be internships or volunteering, gaining these experiences, honing your portfolio, and really creatively connecting with one another, from classmates to professors and on campus. So much great advice. And on behalf of CUNY SPH, we want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and we hope the panel has been insightful and encouraging. If you're a current student, don't forget that there are many resources available for you in navigating your public health career, and just reach out to our Office of Career Services. For potential students, feel free to contact the Office of Admissions for any other information you may need. And staff will be in the main room for a few minutes if you have any other questions. We would also ask if you would please complete the brief survey that will pop up once we end tonight. And I hope to see you all at future events. So have a great night, and thanks again, everyone, for coming out, especially to our panelists.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.